Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 2 of the Jeep TJ project. So let me tell you where we are right now. I did find out that the fuel pump was failing. It was running and I hooked a fuel pressure gauge up to the rail while I was driving it, and most of the time it would give 44, 46 PSI pressure, but then it would just fail. So we went ahead and got the tank out. I'll show you that. We got the pump out right here. We're going to get a new pump. While I had the tank out, I did notice that the brake pedal was really stiff, and we found that both rear brakes weren't even getting fluid. One of the brake cylinders, the bleeder valve was broke off, and the line was crimped. I don't know what's going on with that, but I couldn't even get fluid to the other brake. So through trial and error, taking lines off and blowing compressed air through there, and using mild steel rod, I found out that the original line where this clamps had become solid and no fluid was getting through. So we got a new one of those. We'll get those on and we'll get the brakes put back together and move on from there. All right, well, we got the tank out. It wasn't too big of a deal. You got 3 bolts in the front. You got 4 in the back. You don't need to take the bolts off for the strap. It's strapped to the tank is strapped to the tray. You need to remember to take the 4 screws out here where your gas filler cap goes on the side. I just pulled the whole thing out with it. You can see here the ground straps broke, the vent lines broke. This is obviously our pump assembly I'm going to get out and replace. And before I put everything back together, I'm going to use high pressure air now that I have the fuel line off, and I'm going to blow fuel from the tank back out to the fuel rail. Obviously, after I detach it from the fuel rail, we don't want to blow crap in the fuel rail, but we're going to see if it's plugged, and then we're going to go ahead and put a new pump in. All right, well, I got the pump out, and this is what it looks like. This is the main fuel line here, and of course your harness. What I have noticed was the little nylon sock at the bottom has come off, and that's actually floating in the bottom of the tank, which is outside right now venting, and that may be one of the reasons for the failure. I'm not sure, but again, as old as this is and as many miles as on it, it's just a good idea to replace it now that it's out. I've also been working on the body work. This is a stud gun. It has these studs that go in the tip. You press it up against here, pull the trigger, and it'll weld those studs to that. And then it comes with a slide hammer, and you use the slide hammer to pull them out. So similar to the old school way of drilling a hole and using a screw, but instead of pulling the screw and then having to fill all your holes, weld all your holes closed, and then fill over it, you're just pulling on the stud, and then you can snip them off with a pair of dikes and grind them down. So this works really good. I made fast work of it. This thing was caved in all the way pretty much to the condenser. The only thing that stopped it are these 2 vertical supports right here. So I got that all pulled out. And again, since we're bedlining it, it's good enough for what this project is going to be. So pretty much done with that. We have some rust holes that we got to patch, and we'll get those done, and hopefully we can get this thing running. I'm waiting for brake line parts and a fuel pump and the tray that holds the fuel tank. We'll get the brakes put together, get the tank back in, get it running. We'll finish up on the body work, and then we're going to go ahead and start pulling it apart, pulling the trim off, pulling the interior out, and getting it prepped for bedline. So that's what we're going to be doing next. Well, our new tray arrived for our gas tank. So I got it here with the tank in it. We ordered new straps too. The other ones were too far gone to save. So the new straps did not come with the plastic protectors, I guess, to keep from crushing the plastic tank up against the undercarriage or the bottom of the floorboards. So I drilled 2 holes, 3/16 holes here, and I used rivets to rivet these back on. These were actually cracked up here, so I used rivets with a 3/16 inside diameter to put over these to keep them from spreading apart, to hold these in. Once they're in here and it's up above the floor pan, they're not going anywhere. I haven't got the pump in yet, so I got this plastic over because the tank's clean and I want to keep it that way. I got the neck on. Now, the ground strap was rotten and corroded in half, and I wanted to put a heavy gauge ground strap on. Unfortunately, red was what I had. I know people probably think that it should be black, and it really should, but for what this project is, this is going to be fine. I wanted to make sure we had a ground, and I made sure that I WD-40 these hose clamps. These are attached to the hose. I didn't want to tear them off and replace them because I didn't want to tear the hose apart. And we're trying to keep the cost down to a minimum. So I lubed them up really good, penetrating oil, and got them on and got this on. So this is all set to go back in, other than the fuel pump, which we're going to be putting in here in just a few minutes. But I still have to sort out the brakes. So this is the new brake line that I've put on. This is a 9/16 inch. It's basically like a hollow bolt. So you can loosen that and it threads into the actual housing, and then this just comes off. So I got to get brake lines from there to the back of that one, and then over to the back of that one, and then we'll go ahead and get the tank back in, and then this thing will be able to move under its own power. So I got the brake lines on. That's mild enough that you can bend it by hand. I did use a small tubing bender for some of the tight bends, especially coming out of the bleeder valve. You can see there, that's one of the places I use it to get that to come out. So we'll go ahead and get these brakes bled and go ahead and get the fuel pump in the tank, and we'll see if we can get this thing back out on the road. All right, well, I got a little ahead of myself when the fuel pump came in. I went ahead and installed it into the tank, and I got the tank put back into the Jeep, and I didn't take any video. I should have, but I got a little ahead of myself. So it's in the Jeep. I got the fuel line hooked up. I got the electric hook backed up. I got the vent line hook backed up. Over here, I have to strip this and put an eyelet on there, and then I'm gonna use a self-tapping screw and put it up here and trying to keep it out of the weather so that it doesn't rot again. But it's in. That's the new tray. Got everything hooked up as far as it needs to be. So we're gonna put some gas in here and see how this goes. One of the things you need to be aware of is, I was on the internet looking to make sure I were the right pump. Apparently there's like a 15-gallon and a 18-gallon tank. A lot of forums say that it's the same tank. The 15-gallon just has a longer neck internally to keep the fuel from rising all the way to the top. Other people say it's 2 different tanks. There's different part numbers, but there are 2 different pumps. There's a 15-gallon pump and an 18-gallon pump. I don't know that there's any difference other than the float arm. I've read a lot of things on the forum that some people said that they went ahead and ordered an 18-gallon fuel pump, and that or maybe it's the 15-gallon fuel pump. Anyway, they put the wrong pump in with the tank, and so that it sits on empty, and they have like a half a tank left. It can dry for days, or they fill the tank and it sits at 3/4 of a tank until you use enough fuel that it starts bringing the flow down. So we're going to see what happens. The tank's empty. I got a gas can for my mower. Probably got a couple gallons in. I'm going to turn the Jeep on first to see where the sending unit actually sits with the gauge with the tank empty, and then I'll go ahead and fill it with fuel and see if it actually was the problem and it's going to start. So all of the information I have suggests that this Jeep has an 18-gallon tank. It's got air conditioning. It's got the 4-liter. It is an early model, 97, and I think that's when they started changing over between these 15 and 18-gallon tank things. So we're going to go ahead and turn the key and see where this fuel gauge lies. But it looks like it's lowering. The low fuel light came on, and the needle's starting to drop into the red. So that's a good thing. Probably just needed a minute to to pick up since it's a resistor-based sending unit. Okay, so that's good. I don't know if you can see that a little bit closer, but that's what we want right there. That's perfect. Okay, well, I got it primed a couple times, got my gauge hooked up. Let's see what happens here. Well, as far as the fuel pump's concerned, it seems to be operating properly. Unfortunately, the Jeep's still not starting, so we do have another issue. But the pump's in, put a couple gallons of gas in it. The gas gauge registers properly where it's supposed to. And even with the key in the on position, not cranking, it's still showing 44 PSI on my pressure gauge hooked up to the rail. So I know the pump's working. I know that fuel's getting to the rail. I don't know why it's not starting yet. It's got another problem, but it was still something that needed to be done. The tray that was holding the gas tank was so corroded that I'm surprised the tank hadn't fallen out on the street yet. So that definitely needed to be done. So it wasn't lost time or wasted money. Still needed to be done. So I'm gonna wrap this up and I'm gonna have to try and figure out why it's not starting. But so stay tuned for that and we'll continue on. Once we get it running, I'm gonna start knocking out the rust repair and see if we can't get this thing bedline for Addie before winter hits. It's kind of sketchy with the weather here. I don't really want a bedline if it's not warm out, but at least we can get the rust holes patched. It'll run and it'll be drivable and move under its own power. So stay tuned for that. I appreciate you guys watching. Please subscribe, I'd appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.